Today, Liss and I are going to go a little off script. We don't really use scripts anyway, but we're going to go a little off script. We're going to go a little rogue today. In one of our previous recordings, we just briefly touched on how acceptance can help us launch into a place of empowerment, even in the face of the most dire situations. Situations such as very concerning diagnoses or even experiences that might actually lead us to death, and to come back and talk about our diagnoses and our experiences, possibility of coming back from the things that we are told are hopeless or terminal or fatal, things like this that can be very devastating to hear, can be very devastating to experience. And
Hi, and welcome to Light for Life. If you are returning to our channel, thank you. We value and appreciate you. Our aim is to shine a bright light on your inner splendor and assist to connect you to your magnificence via what we intend to be enlightened sharing, potentially educational and hopefully entertaining information, as well as encouragement for new perspectives. If you are new here, you are most welcome. We do hope that you will find our content highly beneficial and enjoyable. I am Liz. I'm a science of mind practitioner and a teacher of various healing modalities applicable to all aspects of the self and this life.
And I am Lori. I am a holistic wellness researcher and educator. Welcome to Connections with Liss and Lori. We use the space to offer our perspective regarding multiple different topics that we certainly hope you find inspiring. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to someone who knows exactly what this is like to receive a diagnosis, to be told that there's no hope, to be told that it would be best to put their affairs in order and say their goodbyes, and who has died and has come back to empower others to live their greatest life.
Yes, Laurie, we're going seriously woo in this one, I think, from a lot of people's perspective. So before I start talking about this, I must just say that as much as I am personally a very spiritual person, and I do believe that these experiences are very real experiences, the fact is that we can't know that definitively. We can't prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. So it is a possibility that this is somehow just an action of a dying brain, that for whatever reason, as certain aspects of the brain are shutting down, other aspects are creating these experiences that we have almost in a hallucinatory fashion, perhaps, as certain neural connections are switching off and others are potentially maybe misfiring. So from a scientific point of view, it could just be very well an action that is taking place in the brain, that everyone who has a near-death experience has this experience of a tunnel of light, for example. What's astounding to me is that the mind would access the same archetypes from a Jungian point of view in the psyche, and that those archetypes would be present, that the brain would also access our personal belief system. Because people who believe, for example, in Jesus, see Jesus. People who don't. People who believe in hell, go there. People who don't. So the mind adapts even in that transitional state to our belief system, which, if we truly understand, is the most empowering part of this message. But yes, the first time I died or had a near-death experience, I actually hadn't had my diagnoses yet. Essentially, doctors had spent 2 years trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Tests were cancelling each other out. There was no definitive way to know what was wrong. Eventually, I managed to get myself to a gynecologist who was more than just a gynecologist, but I can't remember what the term is exactly. And back then, more than 20 years ago, he had this very new form of technology that could actually do an internal scan, which is pretty standard these days. But back then, it was considered potentially very dangerous. And would the body be able to deal with the resulting radiation and all of that? And because they hadn't been able to figure out what was wrong with me through any other test, and I had gone for them all, I went to this doctor for the internal scan. But the imaging was really not very good. It's only in the last probably about 5 years that our ability to image inside the body and inside the brain has improved so much. And largely because of improvements that were made through, what do you call an eye doctor? Improvements were made in our ability to actually image what was going on the inside. And that's what led to all this latest and greatest science in terms of brain imaging. But I digress. The imaging back then wasn't very good. But I went for this internal scan, and essentially the reason why some of the other imaging, like the CAT scans and things like that, weren't showing up the problem was just the size of the mass. It was so huge that what was showing up on imaging monitors was just this black blur. So they didn't understand why they couldn't get a clear picture. They didn't understand that all that black blur was mass. But when they did the internal scan, that's what they realized. But because it was so enormous and I was so young, they didn't even consider that it might be cancer. And I was getting negative blood tests from all the cancer panels that they were doing. So they figured that they could just do an operation and remove this massive mass. It was the size of a football. So they scheduled me for an operation, assuming that this was benign, assuming that they could just cut it out and I would be fine. So they got me on the operating table and I bled out because this mass, which was in my birth canal, had literally over 100 fingers that had wrapped itself around everything. It was wrapped around my spine. It was wrapped around all my organs. So the more they were trying to remove this, the more they were having to cut these tendrils and extract them, the more I was bleeding. So I bled out on the operating table and I died. And they had to give me, I don't even know how many transfusions to fight to bring me back. But in the time that I was gone, I had my first near-death experience. So try to imagine the mindset of going to the doctor, believing you're going to wake up tomorrow morning feeling fine because they finally found this thing that's been, agonizing and brutal for the last 2 years, only to wake up in outer space with these two gorgeous looking beings that I've never seen in my life before, sweeping me off through the galaxies to some unknown land. Wait a minute, what is happening? What is happening?
Wow.
And they were not angelic at all. They were very much beings. And next thing I know, I find myself in front of what I have since learned is called a life review. It was essentially this massive curved screen that was playing all these various scenes of my life, none of which I can recall in detail, but I know that's what I was looking at. And they were showing me this and explaining that I had died and I had given myself this exit window because a really, really brutal timeline lay ahead of me. And my soul had potentially thought twice about whether we actually wanted to experience this timeline. And so I definitively said that no, thank you, but I don't want to die. My children are little. I want to come back. They spent a long time, more than 3 attempts, trying to change my mind. Am I sure? It's going to be terrible. But I did come back. And I came back minus the memory of what I was shown lays ahead for me, but nonetheless with the memory that very, very hard times lay ahead of me. So they managed to bring me back on that operating table, obviously gave me fantastic painkillers, and I was out for the night. And the next morning I woke up still on cloud nine, feeling as high as a kite, eating my lovely brekkie that they bought me. When my doctor comes in, all, solemn looking, and how are you this morning, Mrs. Nord? I said, oh, fantastic. Can't wait to phone my hubby. I feel so good. I'm so glad this is over. And he's like, well, actually, we couldn't remove the mass. I was like, what? What do you mean? Why not? And he says, I'm sorry to inform you, but it's cancer. You need to go for this test. You need to see this doctor. You need to go here by 2 p.m. You need to do this. You need to do that. This is cancer and it's inoperable. So I come back knowing that death was literally on the table. And now I'm facing a cancer diagnosis. At that stage, I didn't know how severe that diagnosis was going to be. So rushed off, did all the tests. And then the results that came back were stage 4, 3 various kinds of cancers, one of which was stage 3B, which is just a spit away from stage 4. And because it's inoperable, it's untreatable, they were convinced it must have spread absolutely everywhere because these fingers were around everything. So they were testing for lung cancer and spleen cancer and kidney cancer and pancreatic cancer and bone marrow cancer and you name it, because the fingers were everywhere. So they were convinced, because it was aggressive and invasive, that it was everywhere. And I still thank the angels to this day that it wasn't. It was stage 4 cervical cancer, the stage 4 tumor, and stage 3B bladder cancer, but it hadn't spread anywhere else yet. And then I was informed that there was no available treatment for it. Because it was aggressive and it was invasive and it was a combination of 3 different cancers and it was already so far advanced, they told me that I had 3 weeks to live, at best 3 days, unless I went into theatre to have stents put in my kidneys because they were failing. And in 3 days, I would die from kidney failure because I just had too many cancerous toxins in my bloodstream. My kidneys couldn't cope.
What was your age?
29.
29.
I gave myself 1 day to freak out about it,
Yeah.
which I did. And then I determined to find my power. No, I am not going to die. This is not it for me. So I had to go for the operation to put stents into my kidneys to force them to stay open to keep functioning. And they were very, very worried about putting me under because I was in such a terrible physical state. And in fact, they could not bring me back from the anesthetic. And I was met by my 2 beings again. And they took me back to that screen. And they tried even harder to convince me, am I absolutely sure that I don't just want to come to them, to paradise and La La Land, because it is amazing? I was like, no, I refuse to die. This is not my time. I'm not leaving my children. I'm not leaving my husband. Send me back. So I did, in fact, come back. They managed to wake me up out of the kidney stent operation, and then began a very long journey trying to find a doctor who would treat me. Eventually, I found Dr. number 13, who had to put me on an incredibly severe protocol of chemotherapy, which he never promised would cure me, but at best, it could give me, if I responded, 5 years before I would get fatal leukemia as a result of the treatment. That's another whole story. But essentially, when I went in for the first 5-day treatment of his regime, they had to put me in a coma, medically induced coma, for 5 days because the treatment was going to be too brutal. I couldn't be awake for it. So my doctor literally spent 5 days on a chair next to my bed, monitoring me every second, taking me to the brink of death and bringing me back, taking me to the brink of death and bringing me back. And after the third day of that treatment, there was one moment where my heart did stop. I flatlined. And they had to fight for quite a while to bring me back from that one. And that was my third near-death experience. So not only do I know that it is possible to come back from that experience, whether it's happening in the mind or it's happening as an actual spiritual experience, it is possible to come back from that experience. And it is possible to receive a hopeless and a terminal diagnosis, not accept it, and still be here 20 years later, 2 more cancers in between, and be thriving. Because there is nothing more powerful than our will to live.
Well, if that's a place to end, I don't even know a better place to end, because if that is not a more truer statement from someone who has exercised her powerful will to live, I mean, it's quite profound. Excuse me, I know you probably haven't talked about this a whole lot. I don't know if you've ever even talked about it in public, but I'm very grateful to hear the story. Not because I'm interested in all of the horrible things that you went through, but it helps me better understand how incredibly powerful you are. And it's a demonstration of commitment to yourself, commitment to your life, commitment to your children, and really just the power of our human spirit to say, you know what, I hear you. I hear that this is going to be really tough. I'm going to do it anyway. My kids need me. I want to be with my husband more. I can do this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure,
Yes, really.
I'm sure there were times when you went, oh boy, they weren't kidding. This is tough.
Yes. Yes, there were. But there's so much to say about what you just said, honey. So sorry, I've got my little dog barking at me to be picked up. So give me one second. You are so naughty, Nana. Seriously. She won't stop barking if I don't fetch her. Honey, what I wanted to say is, while from my heart I truly appreciate the compliment that I am so strong, but the truth is I'm not. And it's actually really bad to make me special, because I'm not. I have no superpower and I have no ability. I hold no essence that you don't,
True.
that we all
Absolutely.
don't.
True.
And to make me special, to make me somehow stronger, is to give yourself an out for having to discover the same power for yourself. Because the thing is, how powerful our will is literally a derivative of the truth. Will is the outworking function of truth. So when we will come into alignment with the truth of who we are, the truth of life itself, the truth of our power, that is when our will is strong. It's not our strength. It's the strength of the truth. That's what our will is. And we can all access that. We can all access that. And where do we find the power to trust in the truth like that in order to empower our will? We find it in love. That's what I had. Love. Love for my children. Love for my husband. That connected to the truth that I am supposed to be here for them. We all have someone or something that we love that much. We all have someone or something for whom we can and will be strong. And so, yes, love is the superpower that we all share. And truth is the power that gives us a will that is indefeatable. I am not special. I am not an exception. Miracles aren't rare.
Yeah, I agree. We are all deserving of our own miracles, absolutely. But I do still believe that it is a testament to, not everybody finds that love. Not everybody finds that will and that determination to commit to life again. I mean, we can see a demonstration of that everywhere we look, is unfortunately a lot of people buy into fear and hopelessness. And that is not at all what you chose.
No, and you know what? It is okay if someone else chooses it.
Yeah,
It is okay to
absolutely.
be done. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow yourself to be done.
Yes.
Sometimes you've just fought hard enough for long enough.
Hmm.
I always said I could never do it again. I could never do it again. It was
Hmm.
hell on earth for 18 months. I could
Yeah.
never do it again. Cancer came back 2 years ago, two different kinds. Stage 3B again. It was no walk in the park.
Yeah.
I didn't think I could ever do it again. Guess what? I did. And it wasn't even a question if I would. My children are adults now. I still love life. I still love being here. I still love that I can bring meaning to my suffering by potentially helping others. There's still so much joy to be had, beaches to be walked, coffee to be drunk, sunrises to enjoy. I'm not done. And that's the part that is our choice. If we are done, if we're truly done, then we're at peace. If we're not at peace, we're not done.
Thank you for connecting with Light for Life. If you appreciate reminders, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can receive those notifications. If you would like to work with one of us, you can find our contact information in the About section of this channel.
Yes, thank you for connecting with Light for Life. Please share your insights, your questions, and your comments with us in the comment section below. We value your feedback. And we really hope that we will see you for our next episode. We upload one every Thursday. Until then, bye-bye and be joyful.
Until we connect again, we send you love and light.